Okay, back again with a how-to video. Today's video, we're gonna go over a few different techniques, but in the end, we're going to make a Mother's Day tray, which is here, but we are actually going to make it on this tray here. So today I'm gonna go over a few different techniques that I've done in my previous videos, but I'm gonna kind of incorporate them all in this one particular video. So I wanted to do a distressed Mother's Day tray. So I'm gonna go over how I got this particular look. So first, you're going to stain your piece of wood. Now this particular stain I made, it's just a homemade stain using acrylic paint. This is the brand that I use. It's from Dollarama. It's $1.25. What I do is I put this paint with black to make a gray stain, and then I add water. So I'm gonna water it down and it's gonna come out looking like this. It's actually this right here. So as you can see, there's a lot of water in there, but there's also a lot of paint. So you're gonna add more or less paint depending on how see-through you want your stain. So if you don't want a lot of grain showing through, just add some more paint. If you want less paint and more grain, add more water. Hopefully that makes sense. So once you do that, you just take a blow dryer to it and just dry it up for a quicker result. So once you have your dried piece of wood, there it's nice and dry, you're going to take a foam brush. We're going to take some white paint and you're going to apply a generous amount of paint. You're going to cover it all. What I do to get a distressed look, so as you can see, some places the gray is showing through, and then some other places is a really thick white still remains after sanding. So how do you get that look? You apply more white to certain sections. So you can have it as uneven or as even as you want. It just depends on how distressed you want it to look. So there we go. And then paint it. And then if you want to add more paint, because what happens now is when I put more paint on, if it's wet, it's just pushing the paint around, and it's not going to give me that nice thick white look that I'm looking for. So just allow this to dry, add another coat. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so once this all dries, you can take your hand sander, or you can take just regular sandpaper. I use a hand sander. So the reason I use a hand sander on this, when you use just sandpaper, what you're gonna get is grainy lines that go through your strokes. So it doesn't give it a nice, clean, sanded look. So for this particular project, I would suggest using a hand sander, but if you don't have that, don't worry, you can use sandpaper and it will look great. So the next thing I want to go over is the stencil itself. So as you can see, I've weeded out some of the letters, but I've left the letters that have centers in them. So this is called reverse weeding, is what I'm gonna do. So because a lot of my stencil has the center pieces there, I'm just going to leave the stencil like this. I'm gonna apply the transfer tape to the entire thing without weeding it. Then I'm going to put this on here. Then I'm gonna weed it. What happens is it is going to take up all these center pieces, and I don't have to sit there for hours trying to take the center piece out. So I'm going to show you what I mean here. So here I'm taking out an O. When I go to weed it, what happens is that entire piece comes up, and you could be there for, you know, half an hour more just weeding out those little tiny pieces, and I don't got time for that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply my transfer tape. I'm gonna put it right on my board, then I'm gonna weed it. So that's reverse weeding. Okay, so I went ahead and I put the stencil on. And I just want to go over how I measured to make sure that it equaled out. Now, if you can see up here, the letters aren't a straight line. All the letters, they kind of have their own spacing. So what I did was I went to the little banner flag here, the corners, and I just measured to make sure that the distance from the top of the banner to the bottom of this last piece of wood here was the exact same. That way I know it is proportioned correctly. And again, I did it the same. I went to the tip of the banner, made sure that it was the same distance to this piece of wood as it was to this piece of wood. Now, instead of me going over how taking out every single piece of these, the middle pieces here, I'll be here for days and nobody wants to watch that. So I'm gonna do 1 or 2 and show you how I do it. So I'm gonna bring the camera down a bit to show you just how easy it is. Now this is my weeding tool. It's a pin. I love it. It's I don't have to mess around with that weeding tool here. So here I'm taking out an O. So as you can see, because it's already adhered, the centerpieces are already adhered to the wood. When I pull up that O, the voids stay there. And the same up here is a little tiny R, or a little piece of an R. There we go. Now I'm not having to worry whether or not it's going to come up and having to push it down and all that stuff. It's going to save me and you a lot of time by doing it this way. Okay, so I'm going to finish doing my weeding and then I will be back. Okay, so I went ahead and I finished weeding the stencil. Now the stencil you can find on Etsy. I will post where to find it. It's super cute. I think I paid $4, I think, Canadian for it. For the stencil itself, like the material, the vinyl, I get it from Walmart. This is my absolute favorite vinyl to work with. It's actually just a peel and stick laminate. You put in drawers, but it works super well. As you can see, it's sticky enough to adhere to the wood, but also not as sticky to be able to pull it up without pulling the paint. Okay, so for paint, again, I'm just going to use dollar store acrylic paint. It's just going to be black. Going to take my palette tray here and just a sponge. This is a makeup sponge. Again, you can get it at the dollar store. $1.50, I think, or $1.25. Wash it and reuse it, just like, as you can see, it's been used a couple times. Okay, so because the background is white, I'm not going to have to use a lot of paint or a lot of coats to do this. Now, if this were a black background, like the previous one that you saw, it was a dark brown stain. It took me probably 6 or 7 coats of white to get it to look good enough, I guess. But so here, just going to stab it. I'm not going to use a lot of paint. I'm just going to just get enough on there so that I can do one word pretty much at a time. So again, I just stab it, and then I use these little holes, or these little, yeah, I guess holes, to take off the excess paint. Okay. So there you see, I'm not, probably 2 coats is going to be all that I'm going to need to do to get it to look good. Now, as you can see, the wood that I'm using, it's 4 inches wide each piece, and there's 3 of them. So 4-inch piece by 24 inches. So it's 2 feet long by 12 inches wide by the time you add all these up. So what I did was I screwed them all together, screwed the back, and I used 3 screws per side. So the screw is underneath and it goes up into this board here, securing it all. So when I put my stencil on the boards, it goes over the cracks here. So what I did is I just took my fingernail, and where the stencil meets the crack, I just rubbed my fingernail on there to press it into the grooves. So when I do put my paint on, it's not going to run. There's not going to be any gap there for the paint to run underneath. So hopefully when I pull up the stencil, I don't have a lot of cleaning up to do in terms of the paint running. I'm actually probably only have to do 1 coat. And because it's a rustic looking tray, it's already distressed. Even if the black isn't consistent in all the letters, it will still look good because it's a rustic looking background. If you are going to do 2 coats, I suggest you let the first coat dry, especially if you're using a lighter color. If you don't want to do this distressed look, if you want to just do a dark stain, I would suggest you let each coat dry between each other, because what happens is if this is white and you go to press it again with paint, it just comes up with it, and then it just, yeah, it takes longer. So just let each coat dry before you apply more. Okay, so I am going to do 2 coats. So I'm going to let this dry for a couple minutes, and then I'm going to put a second coat on, and then I'll come back and then we'll peel up the stencil. Okay, so this is my second coat that I did. Now I'm just going to pull up stencil. Some people want the paint to dry before they pull up the stencil. For me, when I use acrylic paint, I don't find that it really matters all that much whether or not you wait for the paint to dry or not. So this is like semi-dry. I'd say it's more wet than it is dry. But if you are going to use, there's obviously different types of acrylic paint. If you're going to use one that's not multi-purpose or multi-surface paint, I find that the paint is thicker. So when you do pull up the paint, if it's dry, it actually pulls the paint up with it. So I missed a spot. So here's an example. So here I can tell that I've missed black. I've missed the black paint altogether. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to flatten it again. I don't know how I missed that. Okay. And I'm just going to apply more black to it. Ta-da! Fixed. I'm going to pull it up. There we go. Oh, better. All right, so as you can see, I'm going to show you what I was talking about when the stencil goes over the pieces of wood that I put together. So as you can see here, at the end of this R, there's some paint that had seeped underneath the stencil and leaked or spidered off. So all I do, that's why it's great that I use a pin, because it's super, super thin. So I just take the pin and I just scrape off the paint. Now, a great thing about distressed wood is you can have pieces like this and you scrape it and it kind of just looks like it belongs. So if it doesn't look like it belongs, all you do is you grab a little bit of white paint, put it there and wipe it down a bit to make it kind of blend in, and away you go. So I'll show you how I do that because I don't want to pick at this too much. I'm going to try to pick at it as little as possible and just show you kind of how I fix that. So as you can see, this stencil or this vinyl that I use for stencil is amazing. And I got it at Walmart for less than $4 Canadian. And it lasts me probably, I don't even know, probably like 10 projects. Now, obviously it's gonna vary depending on the size of your projects, right? If you have small projects or big projects, it's going to differ in size. But in average, it lasts me about 10 projects. So if you are using currently stencil vinyl, that gets really expensive. Like I remember paying like $3 or $4 for like 3 feet. So $1 a foot, $1 12 inches, right? Like that's a lot of money when you're thinking 10 projects, right? That's a lot. So I would suggest you go and you just pick up some, give it a try. Don't do anything that that somebody's paying for. Just do it on projects that that you are going to keep for practice. And then once you get used to it, once you get the hang of it, once you get to see how the material works for you, then you can use it as your everyday stencil vinyl. That's how I came across it. And the setting that you use for it is, so you would set your Cricut to custom, and you would use it as printable vinyl because it's kind of the same texture as printable vinyl, and it's the same thickness really. It just comes in a roll. But I don't suggest you use it as printable vinyl. I haven't done it. I don't know, maybe somebody has, but I don't see that working out, putting that in, because it's on a roll. So I don't know how that would work, putting it in a printer. But anyways, the setting is printable vinyl and it will cut perfectly for you. So as you can see, these little pieces here. Now, if I had to weed this out the conventional way, my goodness, I'd still be there today weeding all these little tiny pieces out. So that's why it's great just to put it all under the transfer tape, put it on your wood, and weed it once it's on your wood. Because then these little tiny centerpieces stay intact because they're adhered to the wood. Okay, so I'm gonna finish weeding. I'm sure this is pretty boring for you to watch me weed. And then once I'm done weeding, I'll come back and I'll show you what I'm gonna do for these pieces here. So you can see off the M, it's bled a little bit. Down here, we're pretty good. There's a few spots that maybe I'll clean up. And then, so yeah, I'll come back and I'll go over how to do that. Okay. Okay, so I finished weeding. Now I'm going to take a very thin paintbrush. The tip of it is pretty thin. Just going to use some white. And I'm just going to go in the parts where it bled. And then I'm just going to play with it to flatten it out. There we go. Do the same over here. in the H here. Got a little bit of white in my H. There we go. Okay, and then maybe just a little bit down here. I'm gonna clean it up a bit. But again, the great thing about having a distressed look is it doesn't have to be perfect because it has that that unfinished, unfinished, not perfect look. So it's okay that it doesn't look perfect. This piece does not want to come up. There we go. A is giving me a little bit of a hard time, so I'm just going to go in with black, fix it up. There we go. Same with the H. I am probably going to go back because that's going to bother me. I'm sorry. For most people, this would be okay, but for me, I have like a perfection problem. Okay, so there you go. Now, the last thing we're going to do is put handles on them. So these handles, they've got like a unfinished look to them. I don't know what this finish is called. I just call it rustic finish, but that's probably not the name for it. But anyway, so I'm gonna put it here. I got them from Home Depot. They were $3.05 a piece. I think that's relatively expensive, especially when it's only for one. And if you're going to sell them, you're looking at $6 just for the handles, right? So that kind of puts this tray in a higher price point because you want to get your money back for these silly little handles. So you'd be looking at about $45 to $50 for just the tray. That's probably where I'm gonna market them at. So when you attach the handles, you're just gonna take your trusty ruler. This is, again, dollar store stuff. It's great. And you're just going to measure to make sure. So we're here at 2 inches from tip. And here we're looking at probably 3.5. Because my Cricut's in the way, I can't do it exactly, but that's what you would do. You just want to make sure that they're evenly spaced, they're in the correct position. And then you're going to take your screws, grab your screwdriver or your electric drill, I guess, and you're going to put them in. So I'm just going to finish this off and then I will show you the finished product. Okay, so there you have it. The handles are on. Make sure that I measured the same distance from the top to the bottom. All right, so if you have any questions about what you saw here or about any of the techniques, just please shoot me a message. Have a great day. Bye.